I think that in the church, it is very easy for sex to feel like something God allows that the world owns. I think it's easy to see sex as something that the world created, that is perverted, but that God has redeemed and allowed us to have. And that's not the case. Sex is something that God created and the world perverted. And we have to realize that. We have to realize that this is holy and sacred and a gift from God. This is not something gross and perverted that we just get to partake of because God slipped it into marriage also. It's like, well, if they're going to do it, you guys can do it too, but only like this. I think that's how we view sex.
Sure.
It's like the world gets to do it however they want, and we get to do it a little bit too this way, and it's like, no. Sex is something that God created for our closeness and our intimacy and to create a family. And like, it's this amazing gift, but we so easily let the perversion of the world look like the root of what sex is. And it's not. Hey, welcome back to the Greater Marriage Podcast, where we believe that a thriving marriage is God's intention for you. It's His plan for you. And He has given you everything that you need according to life and godliness to live and have a great marriage. And so today our topic is, how can we improve our sex life in marriage?
Yes.
Right? We believe, and we're gonna get into this a lot. We do believe that sex is something that is created for marriage only. With God has given us a boundary for this thing that He blessed us with. And so we do believe that if you are single, if you are dating, if you are engaged, you should not be engaging in sexual activity. If you have, there is no shame in that. You could begin right now to do things God's way. And we're going to lay out some of the things that we believe God has given us, some of the word that He's given us in Scripture, relating to sex and how it relates to us as married people, how we improve that part of our relationship, how important that part of our relationship is. Honestly, every time we talk about this, I feel like the response is greater than any other subject that we cover.
Yeah.
I mean, communication is so important. Obviously, like understanding God's order for relationships is so important, but nothing gets a response from people like sex does.
Yeah, and that's why we're in an entire series just about sex. I mean, it's so multifaceted. There's so many different things that we could talk about within that world. And so that's kind of our heart in this series. We're not, just a straight up sex podcast. We're going to talk about other things also. But for now, we are sitting on this topic for a while because there's a great need there. And I think that it's one of those things that for a lot of people maybe feels like an untouchable area.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't have a safe space that they can go to seek help if they need help, or to ask questions, or they're hitting their heads on something because of the way that they were raised. Like me, I was raised Southern Baptist and we didn't talk about it. Sex was like a cuss word, we didn't talk about it. And so then jumping into marriage, wow, there's a whole lot of questions that come up. And so our hope is that this can be a place that maybe some of those questions can get answered. Maybe this will cause you to do a deep dive into what the Word says about your sex life and what God's promise is for us regarding sex.
Yeah. It's funny because this is something that's hard to Google. Like sex information is not the easiest thing to find when you're going online. You need to be careful. I mean, we have boundaries in place and things in place on all of our devices. We're raising boys, so it's like we are very protective of what they see, of what we see as a couple. We make sure that we have boundaries in place and software on all of our devices that doesn't allow us to obviously look at certain things on the web and
shameless plug there. If you need a device filtering software, we use one called Covenant Eyes. It's a monthly charge.
It's great.
We are not getting paid to say this. We just love it. We have it on everything, and it really is just an incredible tool just to kind of put those boundaries and safeguards in place to make sure that your marriage is protected, your kids are protected, your home is protected.
Yeah,
so,
I have several friends that use it, and I am the accountability partner to those friends. And as are, they to me, and Heather is, we are each other's as well. Like her devices come to me, my devices go to her. And so just a safe way to protect our family, protect our hearts, and protect our marriage.
And really,
and our kids.
To improve your sex life.
And improve your sex life.
That's what we're talking about today.
Exactly.
And that's a huge foundational piece to
Yeah.
protect your sex life.
So let's start with God's intention for sex and intimacy, and just kind of go back to the very beginning of what is God's intention for it? What was God thinking when he created human beings? Did he create us for sex? Is sex a gift from him?
Is it just for procreation?
Is it just for procreation? Like, what is it, and how is God blessed with it, and where does it show up in the Word?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Okay. So I think this foundational verse that we're going to sit on is 1 Corinthians 7, verses 3-5. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. Right there, we see a picture that this is a mutual thing. I think it's easy for people to think like, oh, sex is like the man's thing, and it's just the wife's duty, to fulfill his sexual desires. But right there in the Word, it shows us that the wife gives her authority to the husband, just as the husband gives authority to his wife. So it's a two-sided street.
Yeah, and this goes back to the very beginning, right? So what Paul's referencing here when he's talking to the church of Corinth is the creation story. That this is something that we share mutually, that we give to one another. We've said before, this is something that you give to one another, not something that you take from one another. I think that we can think of sex as something that I take from you, or
Right.
something that I'm trying to get from you. And that's not God's vision for sex. Sex is something that we give one another. This intimacy,
really
this
good.
closeness is a gift from God that he's given us as a couple to create a family, yes, to create a home, yes, but it's also something that we give to one another. It's a gift that we give. And so, when you look back at the creation story, Genesis 1 tells the story of God creating everything in 7 days. And at the end of this, it says that he creates man and woman in his image, in his likeness. He created them. And the very first thing he says is be fruitful and multiply. That's the first command
Wow.
that God gives mankind. Not dominate the earth, right? He does say to subdue the earth. He does tell us to go and dominate and to that the earth is ours and the fullness thereof. Like, we know that he's put us on earth. We are unique beings, right? We're the only beings made in his image. And so we know that. But the first thing he said to the man and the woman was to be fruitful and multiply.
There's an order there.
There's an order there. And then Moses comes back in Genesis 2 and tells the story of Adam and Eve specifically. And the first thing he references after God takes Adam, puts him to sleep, takes the rib or the side from him and creates Eve, right? He creates woman from man. Adam wakes up and says, alas, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, like this one is like me. And then Moses said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. Then he follows that by saying, they were both naked and unashamed. The first thing Moses references is physical intimacy and nakedness and closeness within the couple. So like it's part of God's design that we be intimate and naked and close to one another. This is something he created, and this is one of the ways that we reflect the image of God.
Right.
He said, I created them in my likeness. Now be fruitful and multiply. If that doesn't reference the likeness of God, or if that doesn't, if this is not one of the ways that we reflect the image of God, why would it be the first thing he commanded us to do after he said, I created them in my likeness and my image? This is something God gave us. This is a way that we reflect him. It's a way that we worship him and within the boundaries of a marriage, within the boundaries that he created. Everything that God blesses us with, he creates boundaries for. And so this is one of those things.
So you said this is a way that we worship. So you think intimacy within marriage, sex within marriage is worship to the Lord.
Absolutely. Yeah, because to worship God is to glorify his name, right? And so worship doesn't mean music, right? It's to glorify him. It's to bless his name. It's to bless what he's like. It's to we enter his courts with thanksgiving, right? Like or his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. And so it's one of the ways that we thank him and praise him is to do what he's created us to do. That's how we reflect his glory, and it worships him and blesses him whenever we do that. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's a form of worship and a form of glorifying God.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's a really different way to look at sex. I don't know how many people think when they're in the bedroom, like, this is worshiping the Lord.
Right.
And maybe that should be more at the forefront of our mind than it is. It definitely isn't the first thing I think about when I think about, being intimate. But you're exactly right. It does glorify the Lord. And he delights in the prosperity of his people. And this is a piece of prosperity. Our marriage prospers when we have a healthy sex life.
It's funny. One of the definitions of prosper is to move forward humbly in the face of adversity. And I think that this is one of those things that it does take humility to have a great sex life. And it does take moving forward in the face of adversity to have a great sex life. But God has called us to prosper, which is to move forward humbly, even in the midst of adversity, even through hard things. We prosper, we overcome. And so this is one of those things that we get to prosper and we get to move forward humbly and overcome some of the stigma that comes with it or the shame that comes with it. If you raised up in purity culture and in the church, it's like there's sometimes shame can be attached to sex. Or perversion can be attached to sex, and that's not how God created it to be. Intimacy is a gift and not a duty.
Right.
I think that sometimes we think sex is just something we have to do, but God has given it as a gift of something that we get to enjoy, that we get to do. Do you want to speak to that a little bit from a woman's perspective, from a wife's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, so much of that does go back to the purity culture, and we're gonna spend an entire episode just diving into that because there is
Just tearing it apart is what we're gonna do.
tearing it apart. But it's so true. Like, we just, without even realizing it, we bring these preconceived notions into marriage, and for whatever reason, marriage or sex is painted as this deep desire for a man and a duty for a woman. We see it all over. We see it in the media. We honestly see it in the church, whether it's directly communicated that way or not. There are things being taught in the church, sometimes just by culture, that definitely push that sex is for men and it's a duty for women. And that's just not the case.
No, it's
and so
not.
breaking that mindset off of ourselves is how we walk in true freedom and growth in our sex life.
Yeah, for sure. Intimacy we wrote this, intimacy should feel like a gift to cherish and enjoy, not a have to or a burden.
Yeah.
If both spouses are invested in each other's emotional and physical well-being, it enhances the experience. Again, this comes back to something that we give one another, not something that we take from one another.
Right.
Like, I am invested in you, you are invested in my well-being, and we are invested in pleasing one another, not just something that we get or that we take. You know what I mean? I think that in the church, it is very easy for sex to feel like something God allows that the world owns. I think it's easy to see sex as something that the world created, that is perverted, but that God has redeemed and allowed us to have. And that's not the case. Sex is something that God created and the world perverted. And we have to realize that. We have to realize that this is holy and sacred and a gift from God. This is not something gross and perverted that we just get to partake of because God slipped it into marriage also. It's like, well, if they're going to do it, you guys can do it too, but only like this. I think that's how we view sex.
Sure.
It's like the world gets to do it however they want, and we get to do it a little bit too this way, and it's like, no. Sex is something that God created for our closeness and our intimacy and to create a family. And like, it's this amazing gift, but we so easily let the perversion of the world look like the root of what sex is. And it's not. That's a counterfeit. Everything that the enemy does is going to counterfeit what God has done. He's not a creator, right? The enemy can create nothing new. All he creates is havoc. All he can create is a perversion of what God has already created. And so I think that when we have to realize that this is something from the Creator, and we have to view it that way and realize we're not partaking in something that's perverted. We're not partaking in something that is broken and just trying to find the good way to do it or the holy way to do it. No. It's the exact opposite. The world has stolen this and perverted it and made it something that it's not. This is how to become one of the many ways that two become one. And in the physical sense, it's the way that two become one. And so I think that we need to have a healthy view of sexual intimacy and realize that one of the ways that we improve our sex life is to simply have that correct view of what it is in the first place.
Sure.
Right? That's a really big deal.
I mean, isn't that just like the enemy, though, to go after a gift that the Lord has given us?
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
we're three-part beings. We're spirit, soul, and body. And so a third of our marriage is the physical. And so the enemy sees that as an easy one for him to knock off. You know, it's like, I remember one time in a leadership training we were in, they were talking about the slats of a barrel. And if one of the slats, you know, is shorter than the other, the water is going to leak out. Everything inside is going to leak out. And I think that our marriages can be the same way. If this slat of our physical intimacy of our sex life is lacking, everything inside, everything we're pouring in is going to continue to leak out. And so the enemy doesn't always come in and just knock our feet out from under us across the board and we go straight to divorce. He goes, he goes around like a prowling lion, seeking whom he may devour. And so he's going to go in there and see like, okay, this, you know, idea of sex has been perverted. So yeah, let's try and slip them up here. Let's try and pull that slat down. So no matter how much they're pouring in, it's just going to keep pouring out. And once we realize like this piece of our relationship needs some focus, we begin to build that up, and everything inside
Raises the water
benefits
level of
because of
everything.
it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's easy to look at our marriage and be like, man, we're down here. I'm only this fulfilled in my marriage. And it's like, no, you're only as fulfilled as your lowest slat.
Right.
So you bring that slat up and the fulfillment of everything, the water level on everything rises,
Yep.
right? And so you're that much more fulfilled in your marriage as a whole, because this physical part is just a piece of a whole, right? And so it's not the thing, it's a thing that God has given us to feel closeness and to feel intimacy. And so in that, I think that we need to realize that it's not that everything is low or everything is just leaking out. It's like, no, if we can raise that, if we can find which slat it is that is low and raise that, it raises the bar and everything.
So would you agree with the statement that improving our sex life actually can also improve our spiritual connection, our soul connection?
Oh, absolutely.
All of those other elements?
Yeah, I mean, you can be intimate in several different ways, and one of the ways is physical intimacy. One of the ways is a spiritual intimacy, right? A knowing. I heard somebody say it one way, that intimacy is just into me you see. That is so churchy, but man,
so bad.
I apologize for
can't
that.
believe you just said that.
However,
I'm embarrassed
it's
for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for being embarrassed for me. However, it's a pretty good picture of what intimacy is, right?
It is.
Into me, you see.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a picture of physicality and also the spiritual side of our relationship and the soul side. Like if I don't let you in on my mind and my will and my emotions and my hobbies and like what I love, right? Then I think that we're lacking intimacy in that area. In the same way, if we're not praying together and seeking the Lord together, we're lacking spiritual intimacy and physical. And I think that the more intimacy that we have in each area, it raises the bar and it raises the intimacy on all of the areas.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I agree.
So then how do we improve our sex life? Do you want to go through some of that?
Yeah. So let's just talk about some practical ways. You know me, type A, black and white.
Come on, you got the points, the bullet points.
I need some bullet points. I need some marching orders here.
Heather listens to the podcast with her notepad out and, her pen.
My
She's
highlighter.
taking notes. She's got points
Color
1, 2, and 3. It's
coordination.
color coordinated. Yeah, I'm like,
how do you study?
I'm like standing desk, walking on my treadmill, just scowl, with my headphones in, getting after it on my laptop. I got to be moving. I got to be
Oh
moving.
my
I'm like one of
gosh.
those that like I talk on the phone and I walk outside immediately. Like I can't sit still. And
Have we ever talked about that one time? Like actually, I think we were still engaged. Like first big fight when we realized like, we
man.
really are like polar opposites
Have we talked
here.
about this? I don't know. Hey,
So-
tell it again. Go ahead.
Okay, so Dustyn and I, we were working ministry together, and youth ministry specifically, and we were really just trying to like hone in and focus and seek the Lord on just some direction. And it's
We're
like,
trying to find a name for the youth group.
it's like, all right, let's put our heads down. Let's figure this out. Let's seek the Lord. So we pray. We were engaged, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think we
engaged.
were. Yes, we were kind of like getting ready, to kind of launch and step into that role. And like you said, I've got my laptop, I've got my thesaurus, I've got all
Literally
the
like Bible, dictionary, thesaurus. Like here we go. I'm gonna mess up our set right now. Heather's like, okay, let's pick a name. Thumbing through her books with her notebooks and her pen and her highlighter, and she's like, "Okay, well, what do you? How about Genesis 9:11? What do you feel about this?" Like,
you know
just
what?
going through.
Who makes sure our bills are paid, our calendars run. It all works for your benefit.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to be that because I'm that. So anyways, I'm working like really hard here. You know, I'm like studying and seeking the Lord and just being a real true Christian.
I'm working equally as hard.
Dustyn over here is walking around the living room. He's got music. I think you had music going on a laptop. Then he's got his phone. Flowing. He's like watching some video on his phone, and I'm sitting there like, what is happening? Like, we're supposed to be like, I'm working, you know, not that I'm legalistic or anything, you know, not that I'm trying to hold him to a higher standard, but
different standard. I wouldn't say higher. Different.
So I let it go for a while, and then it's like his pace just picked up, and at that point I'm like ticked because it's just
the creative
distracting
juices were flying. Okay.
Yeah.
At an all-time high.
Yeah, the words in my head were flying also. So he's just going, and I finally am like, okay, I've had it. That's enough. Can you help me? Can you actually do something? I don't remember exactly what I said. It probably was more colorful than that.
Probably.
And we had it out. And then we realized after that conversation, after a lot of words, a lot of talking through, that we just process differently.
Yep.
You know, how did we even get here?
Guess who thought of that name for that youth group?
Oh my gosh.
My guy.
Congratulations. You did. He did.
Oh man, refined youth. We met in the refinery, being refined by the fire of the Lord.
Okay. Wow.
That's great.
Gold star on your chore chart.
Shout out to my refined youth out there. You're all like, 28 and 30 having kids now and living the dream. We're old, but man, what a time.
Okay. So we were just talking about these points. How I've got points.
Yes.
Find out some physical.
My goodness. I apologize for Heather derailing us today. Gracious. All right, babe. Let's get to your points.
Okay.
Your black on white. Here we go.
Guys, if you can't laugh at each other, if you can't laugh in marriage and poke fun at each other and realize at the end of the day it's all in good humor, what do you have going for you? Best friends, right?
Best friends.
Okay.
BFFL.
Never say that again. Okay. First of all, this
I don't know,
one,
my BFF Jill.
We are so off track. Get back on the track.
Back on track. Number 1, take care of your physical health. Get it, Heather.
Okay. Take care of your physical health. I think this one's pretty straightforward, pretty obvious. Obviously, if you're exercising, if you're taking care of your physical health, you're eating right, you're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. More energy means at the end of the day, or whenever you decide to be intimate, you're not deplenished. Deplenished?
Yeah, that's the word.
And you actually have some more energy to give. And then on top of that, working out makes you feel better, makes you look better. And when you look better, you're more confident. Yep. You're more confident in approaching your spouse, coming onto your spouse, all of that. So that one's a pretty easy, straightforward one. Number 2, keep the romance alive outside of the bedroom.
Sex starts in the kitchen, y'all.
Yes.
Come on, we've talked about this.
It really does. And I think that when you're in the
not for dudes. Sex starts literally anywhere with these, most dudes.
That's true. I think when you're dating, it's easy to remember to like send the cute texts and leave the notes and drop off the surprise candy in their car and all that. And then you get married and you get comfortable and you get busy. And before you know it, it's like, well, shoot, I don't know the last time I sent a text just to tell them how much I love them, just to tell them that I thought they looked great today, or, whatever it is. And so that really is filling that tank. If we're talking again about this, this barrel, if you're filling up, this barrel, you're filling up your partner's love tank. And then especially for someone who has the spiritual gift of words of affirmation, if you're dropping in those words of affirmation, or if you're doing those acts of service during the day and cleaning up the kitchen as your spouse is cooking, or whatever, love language your spouse has, you are just continuing to fill up that love tank. And then by the time you get to the bedroom, you're already set up for success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. So action steps, send that text, do that thing. shameless plug, download our free gift and utilize that PDF. We bring this
There's
up a lot.
There's a ton of those in there.
Man, 75 fun and flirty ways to keep the spark alive. This is how you do it. Like, you literally, obviously, like we said, number one, not on our list, number one in my head, have a correct biblical view on what sex is, and have a healthy relationship with sex and a healthy relationship with sexual intimacy. Have conversations with your spouse, but take care of yourself and take care of your spouse, right? You take care of yourself by taking care of your physical body. You take care of your spouse by keeping the romance alive.
Yeah.
Just simply saying the right thing, doing the right thing, figure out their love language and speak that language, whatever that is. Ours are total opposite. I literally think there's 5 of them, right? I think if you looked at mine and you looked at Heather's, they are a mirror image of each other.
They are.
Mine's like the upside down version of yours. And so it's like, hey, we've got to learn to speak one another's language. And I think over time that probably changes a little bit. I think you kind of learn to receive love or even to give love the way that your spouse does. It's just naturally over time. Maybe not, though. Maybe you never adapt to it, and it's just something that you put work in and get after it and make it happen.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in, like, if we're talking about personality, like your innate personality and then your learned personality. I think it can be the same way with your love languages, like your innate love language, and then there can be a learned love language, like I am not necessarily a words of affirmation person, but you are. And so as we've been together over the years, like I've grown to appreciate words a lot more than I did before. And so that's part of that, like making each other better process, and just really becoming better, well-rounded people. Next, number 3, experiment together.
Come on.
You want to take that one? That feels like it's up your alley.
Oh, right up my alley? All right, let's talk about it. We simply wrote, sexual satisfaction can come from trying new things, but this should always be done with mutual respect. Talk openly about what interests you both and try new experiences together. The goal is to grow together and create new experiences, right? And so I think that we do... I never want to disrespect your boundaries. I may want to push your boundaries, and vice versa, right? It's like you have to talk about what you like, what you enjoy.
I wouldn't even say push. I would say challenge.
Sure.
Because it's like, especially when it comes to sex, like why, if there is a boundary there, like why? Why is that boundary there? Is that because of my own insecurity? Like, am I insecure in the bedroom because of something from my past or whatever? And so it's like, hey, like, yeah, push the boundary a little. Of course, we're not talking about anything, that could be harming or, anything like that. Like, but there is a level of, giving ourselves wholly to our spouse that requires that vulnerability to say, like, yeah, okay, you're like, this is what you like. Let's try it, and what's the worst thing that could happen? You try, it's awkward.
It, hate it. All right,
you don't do it again.
Let's not do that again. Yeah.
But it's easy to get in this trap of feeling like sex has to look the same every time. It has to be the same way, the same place, the same, position, like all the things. And it's like, actually, like we get the freedom to make it whatever we want to make it.
Yeah. Now, I will say, if you have experienced sexual trauma, please get help. We are huge advocates of going and getting help, seeking counsel, not only from the church, but also from a professional. One of the standards that we have is that we don't allow people to form opinions for us. They don't hear from the Holy Spirit. So we have together sought counsel from a licensed, certified counselor and therapist, and not just for sex, for several things. We have gone to marriage counseling, but that the woman that walked us through some of those things was a spirit-filled believer. She loved the Lord. She used discernment. She sat us down and said, okay, do you want me to handle this from a licensed professional perspective or from a spirit-filled woman of God perspective? And we're like, both? Yes, please. And she did, and it was unbelievable. Having that that resource is incredible. So if you've ever experienced sexual trauma, or if you have a hard time getting through any of these things, man, seek help.
Yes.
Pray, ask God to allow you to find the right therapist, the right help. Seek counsel within your church. We would never want you to push yourself to a place of total discomfort, or it's like you need to, we need to step out and do things that are a little bit uncomfortable, that we're nervous about or whatever. Like let's experience new things together, right? Within your marriage. However, if you, again, you know yourself, if you feel like you need help, don't be afraid to say, hey, this isn't something I'm comfortable with, but I would like to dig in a little more. I would like to figure out why. And maybe we need to seek some help together because it will help.
Yeah.
It will help you.
So the challenge there with that piece would just be as simply that, just having a conversation with your spouse. Like, maybe you've never asked, like, what do you like? What do you want? And that seems like such a simple question, but have you asked that?
Well, hey, why do we not like this? Why do we not do this?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's
do
like,
you want to try something?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I know that there are other couples that feel this way because I've had conversations with other couples about feeling like this is kind of an untouchable subject to talk about, or feeling awkwardness around talking about it, even within the confines of marriage. I would say even in the beginning of our marriage, that was an area that it's like it happened in the bedroom, or wherever. And like, we didn't really talk about it. It was like, it was what it was and it was good. And that was that. And then one day we realized, like, this is kind of an area of soreness for us because we're not having conversations about it. We talk about our communication. We talk about what we fight about. We talk about our finances. We talk about this and that. But why aren't we talking about our sex life?
Yeah.
If that is a third of us as a being, a third of our marriage, we've got to spend time talking about it.
Yes.
And so I would encourage you to just do that. And it might be awkward at first if you've never had those conversations. But looking at it through the lens of it truly being a gift from the Lord, I think can help break through some of that awkwardness and really open the door for some great communication. Because if you never communicate, maybe even your expectations are going to continue to be unmet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And you have to be willing to say, hey, are you pleased? Like, are you enjoying this? Are you pleased? And be willing to hear, no, let's improve. No, this area kind of sucks for me. Like, let's make it better. Yeah, like you have to be willing to, one, admit that, but then also ask that question and be willing to hear. Do you want to grab that? Let's do it. Okay. Give us 1 second. Heather's going to get her bread out of the oven. We went a little long today. Heather's going to get her bread out of the oven and we'll be right back.
Okay, you keep going. You keep going.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep
All right.
going.
All right. Heather's gonna get the bread. I'm gonna keep going. Here we go. Number 4, prioritize emotion. This is hilarious. Prioritize emotional intimacy. I can't talk to an empty chair. Before you can expect a fulfilling physical relationship, it's important to nurture your emotional connection. Spend time talking and sharing your feelings and building trust. Feeling emotionally safe with each other leads to a more open and satisfying physical relationship. This is exactly what we talked about. Sex starts in the kitchen, right? And we need to be able to prioritize our emotional intimacy. Like I said, you can be intimate in several different ways. This is that soul part, right? Your mind, your will, your emotions. So we need to be able to meet those soul needs and create soul intimacy before we create sex. We always talk about how sex creates soul ties, but do we have soul intimacy before we create those soul ties? Yeah?
I could hear you from the kitchen. Sounded great.
Love it.
My timer started going off. Man, I really thought I timed it well. Thought we could get this episode recorded, but you do it for the sourdough.
Do it for the sourdough.
Do it for the sourdough.
Yeah. So action set, make a priority check. Make a priority check-in with each other regularly, not just about the kids or the finances, but how are you feeling? What do you need emotionally and physically as well? You want to wrap this up with number 5?
Yep. Number 5, prayer and spiritual intimacy. Pray about your sex life.
Yes.
I mean, golly, that is just such a huge, huge piece of it. And I think it's probably at the bottom of our prayer list. Honestly, we're thinking about all of these, physical needs that maybe we have that we're coming to the Lord about. And it's like, hang on, this is a physical need also, whether we realize it or not. And so being vulnerable enough to have that conversation with your spouse first and talk about your sex life, and then together going to the Lord and separately going to the Lord. If there's something that feels like a hang up or a stronghold in you when it comes to the bedroom, like, seek the Lord and ask him to reveal to you if there are some root issues that need to be addressed, some things that need to be dug up so that you can truly walk in freedom to experience the gift that is sex.
Yeah, that's really good. So how do we make our marriage greater today? Man, communicate with one another. So let's go through it real quick. I would say read the Word of God. Read Genesis 1 and 2. Read Ephesians 5. Read 1 Corinthians. Read Hosea 2. I mean, there are so many. Read Songs of Solomon. My goodness. Read these God's like God's vision for the relationship and for sex, you will realize that God's vision for marriage is intimacy in every way. And once you have that idea, and once you realize this is not something perverted, this is not something gross, this is a gift from God, then talk about it, hone it, and make it right. Like, allow yourself to grow in this area. You have the rest of your life to grow in it. So have conversations with your spouse, talk about what you like, experience new things and try new things, and push the boundaries a little bit within the confines of what God gives us, not in a way that hurts you or that makes you feel unwanted or undesired or weird. Like, don't get weird. Do this in a way that continues to show love and deepen your intimacy and connection with one another, and make sure that you are deepening your bond in every area of life. That is so important, that you're doing this well. And so, don't allow it to be something that you don't talk about. Allow this to be something that you talk about often. Have conversations about it. Go to your spouse. Be open and honest and transparent, and watch what God does in your relationship, because it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. This is a really big deal.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, hey, we're so glad you joined us today. Like we said at the beginning, we are going to sit in this series for a while. And so we would encourage you to, look at all of the other videos, listen to these other episodes, allow your thought processes to maybe be challenged a little bit in what sex looks like within your marriage. So also, Dustyn mentioned our free gift to you, 75 fun and flirty ways to keep the spark alive. You can find that over at greatermarriage.com. I wanted to make sure we said that in case anybody was like, wait, how do I get that? Free download for you. We would love to get that in your hands and really just kind of kickstart you on that journey. So we hope that this blessed you, that it maybe challenged your thinking a little bit. Take a minute and maybe share it with your spouse.
Yeah.
And allow us to kind of be the ones to open that door for you, so that when you come back together, you can say like, hey, what'd you think about that podcast episode? And that's an easy lead in to have that conversation if maybe that's an area that's a little bit tough for you. So we're so thankful for you. We love you so much. Go be great.